Divorce lawyers of Reddit. What is the most insane, evil, funny, dumb way a spouse has tried to screw the other? Ian Albert work in the court system. One's case that came in was a couple divorcing on mutual terms. The husband had one child with her and the wife had a child from the previous marriage. He agreed to pay child support for both children. I guess he really cared about this other enough to support her even though it isn't his obligation. Judge signs the order. They go to set up the child support account and it gets kicked back saying you can't have two accounts for one child. Turns out she's been collecting child support from the biological father the entire time and never told him. She basically tried to milk two fathers for one child. And the other attorney knew about it. Not my case. But during my first year of law school, lawyers from different practices came to give us a peek behind the curtain of different areas. The divorce lawyer told the story of a rather well-to-do couple that spent months and months and many tens of thousands of dollars fighting over absolutely everything, all the way down to a single ceramic ashtray. He couldn't remember the significance. But somehow it had come through the husband's family. Even after everything else had been decided. They spent many more months and nearly $100. 000 fighting over just this ashtray. Then, after a court hearing, the wife finally won the ashtray. She promptly strode out to the white courthouse steps and smashed the ceramic ashtray. Left the pieces all over for the husband to see on his way out. Decided that day I would not be a divorce lawyer. TLDR. Spent $100k to win an ashtray only to smash it in spite. Once had a boss who had to leave his house for 6 hours while his ex-wife grabbed all the belongings she was legally entitled to. When he returned home, every knob and handle was gone. Doorknobs, cabinet handles, drawer handles, anything that was screwed onto something and used to open it, he had taken. I am an interpreter who works frequently with police and lawyers. The most out there thing I ever interpreted in court went like this. M's. So and so. We know each other for a long time. Correct? Yes. As a matter of fact. We have known each other for 5 years. Correct? Yes. And at the end of each and every meeting we had during the past 5 years, we always agreed on one thing. Correct? Yes. Please. Tell the judge what we agree on. It's not okay to break in my ex's apartment and lick all his cutlery. Yet. Here we are. M's. So and so. I didn't handle the divorce. I handled parts of the aftermath. In the divorce, she went to Wall. Was living in a truck somewhere. And just couldn't handle it mentally. He gave her 5 of his 9 companies. They were the ones that owed 7 figures in payroll taxes. He had made her the bookkeeper on paper. She spent decades trying to shake the IRS for the results. Till. When you're about to go through a divorce, don't clean out the accounts and hide the money. Grab your pets and put them in a safe place where nobody will ever find them until the divorce is all long over. I'm a lawyer but have had a very limited amount of experience in divorce cases. The first case I ever worked, the husband shaved waxed every single hair off his body in an attempt to avoid a court-mandated drug test. Edit. A word. Articled at a family law firm. Thankfully moved on since. Worst I saw was a decades-long case. Husband had been in a motorcycle accident. Suffered brain damage. Has severely limited capacity going forward. Got a huge settlement afterwards. Wife spent the next several years stealing the entirety of the guy's money and property variously by forging his signature or putting documents in front of him that he couldn't understand and telling him they were something benign so he'd sign it. She then forged a bunch of letters from a tax authority and convinced him he was about to go to jail and further convinced him to flee the country. He finally came back several years later to find out everything he owned was in her name and one of the documents he was told to sign were divorce papers. Dude got left with nothing. I moved on before I found out how the story ended. A soon-to-be ex-husband left his wife's prized koi to die on the doorstep of their house. Apparently the value of these fish, 6 in total, was over $100. 000. She was, according to her lawyer, so distraught that she couldn't be in court. Only in LA. What the FCK? Is this not destruction of livestock property and animal abuse? Koi are really long-lived fish and can become a bit friendly too. Not my divorce. But my divorce lawyer told me about a case she was involved in where both clients were so petty that they had to all meet to argue over literally every single scrap of everything. The final object that neither would settle on was a ceramic rabbit statue. Really generic one from Home Depot or whatever. Zero sentimental value, but since it was the final item, neither side wanted to lose the last thing and they dragged it out over 3 separate meetings for this one thing. I don't remember which ended up getting it. But once they settled it and signed everything, the winning party stuck it on their lawyer's desk as a gift and walked out. They must have felt so cool yet looked so stupid. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but my parents got divorced about a year ago. My mum didn't want my dad to show up in court because he would contest and then they'd have to split the assets. She phoned me and told me to put laxatives in his food so he wouldn't be able to make it there. Divorce lawyer here. Spouse had been out of the house for weeks. She waited until he was on a business trip. Came into the house. Turned on all of the faucets. Plugged the drains. Turned off the furnace. And left. It was -10 degrees. He came back 5 days later. The house was ruined. The water froze and cracked the foundation. Had a client whose wife wanted him out of the house. I told him not to leave. Just move to a different bedroom for the time being because once he was out the chances of him ever getting back in was slim. He texted his wife and told her he was staying in the house. She called back and left a VM that she wanted him out and if he wasn't out soon, she would start taking out her unhappiness on the children. And would remind the children that mommy was being mean to them because daddy wouldn't leave. 101 on how to lose custody. My dad is a divorce attorney. His clients couldn't decide who would get the Labrador puppies from a new litter they just breed. The pups are worth $1,000 a pop. Well, they also hadn't been up to date on their payments. So dad brought a litter of 8 floppy puppies home as collateral for us to have until they could negotiate the settlement. I was an assistant for a family law practice. Not a lawyer. So it was already a disaster of a divorce because the ex-husband was a dick. But it got so much worse when the wife started dating someone new with a severe cat allergy like a year after they split up. Her psycho ex bought a cat on his time with the kids. Except he's not allowed pets at his apartment. He sends the kids back to their mom's house with a cat and all its stuff. Mom is pissed because she didn't want a cat at all, plus her boyfriend is crazy allergic. She calls us asking what to do because her kids are bawling saying that she can't get rid of their new sibling and she has the cat in the garage. Ex told kids if mommy loves you, she'll let you keep the cat since daddy is not allowed cats at his house. She accused her ex-husband of sexually molesting their children while under the watchful eye of the nationally endorsed social workers who oversaw his contact with them, which was only required because he didn't have his own private accommodation at the time. She also said that his Indian flatmates were inherently dirty. After the obviously false child molestation suggestion, I warned her of the consequences of being caught lying about that, i.e. permanent loss of custody. She fired me but kept calling back using fake names to try and obtain free advice which contradicted my advice. But everyone she called immediately spotted her. This was a long time ago and now I specialize in insurance litigation, which is far less ugly. Paralegal for a divorce lawyer here. Our client told us he didn't clear out the marital account after the parties filed. Which technically is true. Because while he removed $45,000 he left about $3.50 in there. Husband and wife divorce after husband finds out wife is assisting other guys. He goes into a deep depression. They didn't have much. Lots of debt and 2 dogs. One was a dog he had had since before the marriage. He got her. The other dog was only about 3 years old and was bought to keep the older, 7-year-old dog company while they worked. Wife demanded that since he got his dog that she got the other. He is depressed and just wants to move on, so he agrees. She gets the dog and has it put down the next day. She didn't want the dog. She just wanted to hurt him. This one hits close to home because it happened between my parents. We had a family friend who was a lawyer and my parents agreed that he would be the lawyer for both of them as a mediator. So, as the assets were being divided, my dad got absolutely slammed. She was going to get the house, cars, half his retirement, and an insane amount of alimony. To the tune of like $2,500 a month for the rest of her life. My dad has a good job as a municipal employee, but that was probably 70%ish of his paycheck. Turns out that my mom and the family friend actually conspired to rip my dad off and make it seem like that's what a divorce settlement looks like. And she was going to kick back more money under the table after the dust had settled. Dad just didn't know how these things worked. So, after some convincing, he finally went out and got his own lawyer. He got a very fair divorce settlement after that. Mom still to this day can't understand why we don't talk to her much. That other attorney could be disbarred for that. Personal experience. Unbeknownst to me, my ex was having an affair. I worked a lot of hours, so I didn't pick up on it. We had always dreamed of buying a house on a huge local lake to retire in. We literally started shopping for houses and even toured a dozen or so. We found two well within our budget, but would need to sell our house first. My wife convinced me to take out a couple loans in my name and get a couple credit cards. Again in my name. Most of the bills were in hers, and the mortgage was in hers, so I did. I spent about $25k in CCN loans to fully update our house and get it ready for market. As soon as the work was done, she told me she was leaving me and wanted to sell the house. Most malicious thing I know of personally involved a co-worker of mine. He was sleeping with a married woman, and ultimately the husband found out she was having an affair. Really ugly divorce ensues, during which they fought over a lot of assets. But the real point of contention was their dog. Lovely GSD named Orion. Eventually, husband gets custody of the dog, and in under a month, has the dog put down, just to hurt her back for the affair. Edit. When I posted this, I thought this situation was a rarity, and have shock and awe value from the cruelty at work. After reading the responses in this thread, not only am I saddened by how many pets get caught in the crossfire, but I am genuinely shocked by the lengths some people will go for petty vengeance. I'm not a lawyer, but I work as a legal assistant for a family lawyer. The ex-husband was getting remarried. 1. His ex-wife sent him and his new fiancée a dozen black roses before their wedding. 2. His ex-wife then had a plane fly across during their wedding, dragging a sign that read, "Name of ex-husband, like sit up the butt." You can't make this stuff up. Sad part is, she was not well and had been in and out of psych wards over the years. I hope she's getting the help she needs now. My uncle's ex tried to work it in that she would get half of whatever my grandmother would leave him when she passes. Joke's on her. My grandmother is passing over her kids, not maliciously. My uncle is very well off and so is my mom, and leaving everything to my brother and me. Oh. Also tried to get sole custody of both of their children, who are in their 20s. Not a divorce lawyer but worked for one back in the 90s. A woman and her kids went on vacation and came back home to find that the soon-to-be ex-husband had broken into their house with his attorney, thrown a party, and microwaved the kids' kitten. Husband's attorney got disbarred I believe, but that was about it. And microwaved the kids' kitten. What the actual FCK is wrong with people? I'm going to school to be a vet assistant. My teacher is a veterinarian. She told us on Monday she's had clients bring their animals in to be euthanized so their spouse couldn't have them. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but my prior employer once was served with an obviously forged garnishment order from an employee's ex-wife, directing garnishment of his wages in an amount that far exceeded his actual wages. We reported it to the police department. Edit. I was quite rightly reminded that posting about an active file, even anonymously and on generic terms, is bad practice. So I removed that. I had one client who was controlling their spouse by keeping them addicted to meth. I fired them. My boss had a client who, well after we fired them, set themselves and their child on fire rather than give up custody. A few people have asked if the above was a specific case. I am ethically prohibited from confirming or denying. But this is sadly not a very unique event. There are lots of reported and unreported instances. None of these are that funny. I apologize. So here's my funny story. On the stand, my client and the other lawyer's client each spent about an hour saying I'm not lying, they're lying, then calling the other a bitch, asshole, goof, you name it. Often using that phrase exactly. At one point one of them was cautioned by the judge for swearing and said FCK. Sorry. The judge decided they were both not credible. Former divorce lawyer. Not so much insane, but unfortunately common. Accusing former spouse of molesting the children and domestic violence to retain full custody and get a restraining order to force spouse away of the marital home. This sets the new status quo for custody, which judges are reluctant to disrupt considerably down the road. Takes months if not years for accused spouse to prove his innocence, and CPS will often find evidence where none exists if accusing party is a good enough manipulator actor. Pretty horrendous long-term outcome for all parties. Kids are brainwashed against a strange parent when young. Later they often grow to resent the accusing parent for poisoning their relationship with a strange parent. Kids often grow up with multitude of mental health issues. Probably one of the worst things a person can do to their children. All to win against their former spouse. I work for a divorce attorney now, but the craziest thing came to my attention when I worked for the prosecuting attorney. This couple was breaking up and Mr. left the house. Mrs. went to work the next morning as usual. When she returned home in the evening, she found Mr. had been to the house and removed his clothing and belongings as she expected. What she didn't expect was that he had also gorilla glued her belongings together. He glued the TV remote to the table, the phone to its cradle, the couch pillows to the couch, and even glued the vacuum cleaner to the carpet. She called the police and reported this as property damage. The police went with her through the house documenting dozens of items glued to various things, but for days she was discovering random things and she would call to amend or update her report. My GD oven mitts were glued to the wall. Or he glued the effing sheets together in the linen closet. I've seen people do and say really awful things to each other, but that was diabolical. I'm in a different area of law. But my co-worker had a client in a messy divorce where the parties were required to split up some antique pots. When the husband delivered the wife's share of the pots to our office, he took a tea in each one of them. I just saw this on a YouTube video. The husband gave the wife everything material, house, cars, etc. In the divorce except his Magic the Gathering collection. When he went to collect it, he found his wife had broken the seal on his MTG Alpha starter deck. This was worth about 20k USD at the time and currently for sale on various sites for around 50k. For context, as soon as you break the seal, the deck becomes worthless, and unless you get some of the insanely priced cards, like Black Lotus, you will lose a significant amount of money. So she literally got all the assets they accrued over the marriage and killed the only thing of value this guy got out of total spite. Magic the Gathering collection. I know of a guy who had these really rare playing card decks that he managed to win in a divorce settlement, and his wife did the same thing. He ended up suing and she had to pay over $250,000 because that would have been the insurance payout if they were stolen. I read one where in the settlement there was shared custody of a parrot. Neither were allowed to teach the parrot to swear at the other one. Not a lawyer, but my partner has a mate who was going through a messy divorce. He registered as a gambling addict and went to some gambling anonymous, or whatever it's called, and proceeded to go to the casino every day, taking wads of cash with him, pretending to gamble it all away, while he was secretly squirreling it all away. That way, When it came to the divorce and he was questioned where all his money went, he could prove that he lost it all through his gambling addiction and never had to pay her a penny. General post. If your ex-spouse wants your pet, and they intend harm to it, and it's not chipped, give the dog away to a friend. They can chip the animal and there you go. They have verified ownership. I see a lot of unsubstantiated accusations of child abuse and or molestation to deteriorate the relationship between dad and the kids. And we'll hire experts and therapists and there will be an investigation. We'll have depositions and a trial. And after a year has passed without dad being allowed to see his children and thousands of dollars have been spent, it will come out that nothing happened. This happens in my practice about once or twice a year. Very common. The moment a parent is caught doing that, they should be jailed and or banned from guardianship. Sick FCKS. Worked at an airport. Big burly guy brings an ugly ass dog in a crate to the counter. He is clearly misty-eyed. Turns out wife got the dog in the divorce and he has to send it to her and she told him as soon as she gets it she is putting it down. He asks if he can have some time with the dog before the flight so they go out in the grass and they both roll around in the grass. Dog's tail just wagging away not knowing anything about his future. The guy puts him back in the crate, drops him off the counter, says thanks and then just walked out head down and just looking crushed. That was 30 years ago and I still remember it like it was yesterday. I worked in family courts when first starting out. The most memorable case I saw was the woman took literally everything out of the house. She ripped out the carpets even. Not a divorce lawyer. But about 15 years ago I handled 2 insurance claims for a man in his 40s or 50s who was getting divorced from his wife, who was in her mid-20s. First she filed a claim on his auto policy. He was wealthy, but had to have a high-risk auto policy due to many speeding tickets. She was not on his policy, saying that he crashed into her car on purpose. The claim was denied because there is no coverage for intentional acts. A couple of weeks later she files a claim on his homeowner's policy, saying that he stole her engagement ring, which was specifically insured at a high amount. Like $10K plus. Again, she is not the policyholder. And the ring wasn't stolen. He just had possession of it. So there was no claim to be made. I wonder whatever happened with that guy. I knew a guy that got out of the military at 19 years so his ex wouldn't get half his pension. He would rather get nothing than give half the pension to his ex if he stayed in one more year. A friend's ex-wife and he settled their divorce with her getting the house. A hefty chunk of retirement. All the gifted jewelry and his Harley she had gifted him for his birthday. A few weeks later, a robbery occurred and the only thing that was stolen was the jewelry that he had gifted her, which was intended for their daughter. She tried to file an insurance claim on the jewelry but forgot to get appraisals and adders riders, so the max insurance paid was $1,500 for over $20,000 of jewelry. Suspicion is she staged it but is now stuck with stolen jewelry she can't legally sell, nor wear, nor give to the daughter without tipping the dad off to the scam. Not a divorce lawyer. But my grandma FK her divorce lawyer before she served her husband the papers. Got pregnant. And then convinced her husband it was his. He paid child support for 18 years and never had a clue. British TTY. The lawyer had a family of his own. 18 years. 18 years. Not a lawyer but was a legal intern for a divorce attorney a few years back. Dumbest f***ing divorce I ever sat through, lasted over 2 years because they refused to let each other get any ground. I was only there for the last year of the divorce but they argued over who got the Christmas ornaments for 4 months. Pro tip. If you're ever in a divorce, saying sure, take it is infinitely cheaper than your invoice would be otherwise. Not a lawyer but when I went through my divorce we were still in the same house for a few months while it sold. I spent a weekend at my brother's a couple hours away to go to a football game to get out of the house. My ex-wife sold off most of the furniture I was planning on taking, a bunch of my power tools, and tried to give the dog away. Luckily the people didn't show up for the dog. That day I took him to my brother's house for safekeeping. She still tried to get the dog in the divorce and was denied. Soulless bitch. Obligatory, not a divorce lawyer, but when my mother was divorcing her first husband and trying to get custody of their daughters, this was before I was born. She had a scheduled trial. But her husband had a friend fake a phone call to her to tell her that the trial was cancelled. So, she went to work that day. Not able to afford to skip a day. In reality, the trial wasn't cancelled. Her husband showed up to court without her. And he won by default. Luckily she was able to explain to the judge what happened. Unfortunately, another day when she was at work, he picked up their daughters and booked a flight all the way up to South Dakota from their home in Arizona. She couldn't afford child support, let alone afford the lawyers to get them back. So she was forced to give them up. What a f-king scumbag.